Good afternoon, everyone. I was already a bit confused when you started speaking German all the time. That, I may have misunderstood, and I was thinking, how can I then do this with my slides? No, but thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Maybe I move straight to the presentation. I'm actually leading our financial services strategy consulting business globally, and as part of that, I'm obviously having the pleasure to talk to many of our banking and insurance clients across the globe, having intense discussion around transformation in general. And I think one of the key topics for transformation is obviously technology-driven transformation. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I try to give you a little bit of a perspective of what we are seeing, why this is so important, what are the success factors of a technology-driven transformation, and then obviously leading over to the key topic of your day-to-day, which is all around data and data storage. So you will then get the pleasure to listen to Ron's presentation afterwards, who's much more an expert than I am in the related topics, but I try to make it as concise as possible. So I've divided my slot into two parts. The first one is really a bit of a bigger picture, the role of digitization and the general state of the financial services industry. I mean, you are all professionals in that industry, you know that very well, so I rather keep it focused, and then a little bit on data specifically, and the data gold rush, because many things are changing, and they are changing apparently much faster than even we may have had anticipated. Although as a consultant, I must say this was clear for us from the onset, but at the end, the speed of change and the intensity of change is fairly impressive. I need to do this slide very quickly because it's just aimed at setting the scene, but for those of you who read it carefully, you will realize that the first bullet is already outdated because the low interest rate environment, and I think that's maybe we did the slide a few months back. We've updated all the other bullets, but we forgot to update the first one. That was still in a time when we thought we are in a Japanization-like scenario in Europe. Yeah, it would be low forever and low for longer. And you see how quickly certain geopolitical events and events like the pandemic can change things entirely from basically half a year to the next. So the low interest rate environment is obviously over. We are moving towards a higher interest rate environment, which has obviously a lot of implications on both banks and insurance, maybe for the better than for the worse. But in general, I mean, when you look at, and that was maybe more my key message here on the macro side, the overall macro environment for financial institutions is not easy, yeah, and that also drives the need for more flexible, more adaptable business models, yeah, and being in a position to react faster to overarching changes in the situation. And this is where obviously technology comes into play. Many of the things we've been talking about for quite some time around competition with fintech, big tech and so on has been a bit more of a buzzword bingo for many years. And everybody was saying, okay, show me where's the impact, yeah? Where are the revenues really at risk? And that is now really changing. Yeah, so we see that many tech-driven, less regulated or non-regulated businesses that are engaging in financial services are becoming a lot more relevant, and this also requires financial institutions, primarily banks, but also more and more on the insurance side, to react on it. Can I just ask a quick question on the audience here? Who's more on the banking side versus on the insurance side? Can anybody who's related to banking more raise their hands? Okay. Insurance? Okay. Neither nor? Okay, good. Okay, gonna be interesting. There are a couple of things, and I'm not telling you any secrets, but when we talk to financial institutions in Europe, in EMEA, but also globally, there are a couple of things that are really changing, and the most important is when we talk what are the key drivers that require financial institutions to change, that drive transformation. It's typically 3 or 4 things that come up in a conversation with the C-suite. One is obviously still cost. Cost-income ratios, combined ratios are for many financial institutions not sustainable. It's not good enough. That still needs to change, and it's not just a cost topic, but it's also a revenue topic. The second most mentioned topic in any meeting with the C-suite is now around technology. And that is something which I find very interesting. It's new, because when you talk to CEOs, when you talk to the businesses in the past, technology was more, it has to be there, it has to work, but it was not really seen as an enabler, as it was not seen as a critical enabler for business models, and that is now changing a lot. And that is also because business models are changing. Business models are much more heading towards platform-driven businesses. They require different infrastructure solutions, but they also require a different type of agility. And when I say agility, not necessarily in the dogmatic sense that everybody has to run a full dogmatic agile program, but it has to be a lot more adaptive, a lot more agile in the mindset and also in the way how we operate. This is interesting. When you look at long-term investments in financial institutions, and that goes back to our annual global CEO survey, and that's across industries in general, but then we've taken out the financial services part of that. You see that digital transformation, the investment, the long-term investments have been or are going to be increased substantially, 49 to 34% before, while cost efficiency initiatives are reduced. So many institutions have been working a lot on cost management initiatives, invested in those things, automation, robotics, and so on. But the wider digital transformation is gaining more and more in importance. You see that the date of the survey, that's the 2021 survey. So you saw that cybersecurity there was a perspective at the time in 2021 that this would go down, in terms of increase significantly versus increase moderately. That has obviously changed now a lot, especially after what we've been seeing over the last couple of months and actually weeks. So, nevertheless, and you are all the experts in that, doing a proper technology-driven transformation is not an easy thing to do. There are a lot of challenges involved in that, and when we look at the landscape of financial services players and we look at the performance of some of the technology-driven or digital transformations, I would say that there's a certain percentage that we would not say has been super successful, right? So because it's not easy, it's fairly demanding, and obviously the key reason is that there are very complex legacy infrastructure environments involved. And what is interesting that we have a number of discussions and actually projects across the globe, I can say, particularly in Europe, where executives reach out to us and say, okay, we've tried over the last couple of years everything to do a proper digital transformation, to transform our legacy infrastructure into something that is an enabler for new business models and the new technology requirement. And by and large, we failed, or we don't get it done in the time frame we need to get it done. And then they often raise the question, isn't it a better idea to put something greenfield next to the legacy infrastructure? We'll start to build it from scratch, how you would build a modern financial institution, which is very different to how a legacy institution looks like. And then we'll just put all the new business into the greenfield institution and somehow wind down the legacy over time, because we may not be able to transform the legacy fast enough and consequently enough to get to a stage where it's really addressing the requirements of a new business model. So this is a very interesting discussion that is happening. We had it the week before last week in Ireland, in Italy, in Germany. So there's a lot of thinking in the management team around that. When we look at successful transformations, there are a couple of areas where we believe one needs to focus on. Obviously, there are a couple of areas that just need to work. One thing is there needs to be a proper foundation layer for modern business models, which is all around building up digital and cloud-enabled core platforms, and to reorganize what I said earlier around more adaptive and agile organizations to make it happen. There's a lot of talk about this. Many people and many institutions are working on that. Has it always been a success? And when you look at some of the showcases that are always talked about, not necessarily all of those agile transformations are really as successful as they are marketed. Yeah? The other four things that are important focus areas from our perspective is that the infrastructure need to adjust to evolving a business model. And this is what I alluded to a bit earlier, and what makes it very interesting from our perspective is that there's really a conversion of business and technology, in the sense that the business is getting much more involved on the what it requires from technology in order to really build, establish, and deliver new business models that are required in order to compete against tech-driven competitors. And this is actually, from my perspective, a very positive development that we didn't have in the past. So this is a key driver. Then obviously, proactive threat management is an important area. Cyber resilience, I mentioned that before already. Simplification and optimization is in line with what I said earlier on the challenges of transforming a legacy infrastructure. It's not an easy thing to do, but and we did quite a bit of analysis recently on the benefits of simplification or the downsides of complexity. It's very, very difficult, as you all know, to make a complex institution simple, yeah? And it's very, very tempting to make a simple organization more complex. And when you look at the players globally that are very successful in terms of their financial performance, then it's mostly institutions that really focus on simplicity, yeah? And we have rarely seen any institutions that are very, very complex that are successful in that space. So really the simplification element is extremely important, and seeing how I can integrate that in my overall technology approach is then very important. And then last but not least, personalized services, getting the right user experience, having the ability to scale personalization in a way that this is really perceived also by the clients as a clear benefit is something that is very important. And then what we typically do is we look at the impact. Does that help me to grow my revenues? Does it help me to reduce my cost? Or does it help me to mitigate my risks? Obviously, there's also happening a lot on the availability of really new and emerging technologies. I think the speed of adopting really new technologies has accelerated substantially over the past couple of years, and we always divide this into when we look at our emerging tech radar, the core technologies, the impact technologies, and the more visionary technologies. And it's, from our perspective, very important that those core technologies are used in a way that really they are addressing the key capability requirements that are needed in order to succeed, that the impact technologies are more actively considered, and this is where also many financial institutions were lacking somehow in terms of speed and I would say also effectiveness in really testing it, in piloting it, in being a bit more flexible and entrepreneurial in that regard. And in the more visionary technologies, given the speed of evolution that we are seeing, the recommendation is clearly to be closer to those developments and to really consider more actively those more visionary technologies for future prototyping. And then obviously we've listed a lot of those themes here, but they are much more elaborated people who can talk about the individual technologies in detail. But it's very important to have also a better view on what is going on the let's say innovation side in technology. I skipped that one for a second. The topic I talked about, and I think I assume many of you have been working on this or have already implemented this, working with more adaptive organizations. I think particularly in the IT data space, there have been some really good reference cases, but there are clear benefits to that, and it's clearly measurable. And this is what you also see when you look at the KPIs and financial impact that you can create with moving from classical organizations to more adaptive organizations. As I said before, it doesn't have to be, from our perspective, agile in a dogmatic way, but the mindset and the philosophy behind that is truly important. Couple of lessons learned from our side on how to run a sustainable and successful transformation, digital transformation. There are 5 aspects one would need to consider. The first thing is really on the collaboration side, to embrace strong collaboration between IT and business functions, or technology and business functions. That sounds like a no-brainer, but as you very well know, in the past that has not always been the case. And this is largely also a mindset change in both the technology world, but also on the business side, getting more familiar with technology, understanding technology more as an enabler for business is very crucial. And also to get the right C-suite involvement, buy-in, making sure that also these things are getting the right sponsorship that they deserve and that they also need. Communication is also important. We see with many of the large digital transformation programs that it's not very clear what the ultimate outcome is. All the business cases are not entirely clear. Are we tracking properly against the business cases? Do we get out of them what we were expecting? Maybe not. So a clear communication of the goals, the benefits, and the roadmap how to get there is also very essential. And then maybe one of the most difficult topics nowadays is the people dimension, the skill dimension. How do I get the right talent for that? Yeah, I mean, we have now the period of the great resignation after the pandemic, which makes it very difficult to get the right talent at all. But specifically on the technology side, you know that the war for talent is very intense, and that is why I think building an attractive proposition to attract, retain, and develop the right talent is very crucial in that space. And the final thing that is really important is also then to establish, and this is a bit more of a soft factor, but very often neglected, is around culture. Yeah, so there needs to be a proper change mindset and a performance culture also for a successful transformation that is really required in order to make it happen. And that's all in the context, and this is something I forgot to mention initially when I talked about the what are the key drivers for transformation in general. Is it cost? Is it technology? And obviously ESG. Yeah, they are all related, and there is a lot more to come specifically on the way how technology can help us to enable successful ESG-driven transformations. Let me maybe show you one more slide on the topic that is now very relevant for you today. Obviously, there is data is getting incredibly important, as you all know. The question is how to best capitalize on that and how to best use it, how to best make it available for the right business models. We listed up a couple of points why data is becoming so essential for business, much more essential than it used to be. What the challenges are, but just to give you one practical example, I was in South Africa earlier this week, and we were talking to a couple of banks that were as part of their overall ESG strategy, and there the E is less important than the S, so it's really about the social angle. And they are trying to push the business for small business lending. And small business lending in developing economies is a very difficult business to be in because the data is typically crap. Yeah? You don't get proper official company data. You don't get proper company bureau data, and this is where especially artificial intelligence and analyzing unstructured data in a way that you get to meaningful input that helps you for proper credit assessments is really a game changer. And that is so important also for the development of certain business lines going forward, that there is a clear need, yeah, for use cases in that area that have a clear business impact. And this is the interesting thing, is this is not technology driven, this is not innovation officer driven, this is clearly business need driven. The business says, okay, I need something in order to develop the business in that field, and in order to make it happen, I need somebody who helps me to get the kind of data I need, and this is where I think a lot of the change is now happening. What do financial institutions need to do from our perspective to be well positioned in that space? Obviously, there's an evolution path moving from we have data over we use data, we think data, to we are data. And it all goes back to the point I was mentioning earlier, that it's really around a business-driven data strategy. And this is the key aspect, I think, that many of you, I assume, also experience when we work also on more strategic assignments for companies. It's very much focused on how can I better enable the data I have or the data I don't have, in order to enhance my business models going forward. So these were a couple of thoughts, and thank you for the reminder on the time. I saw that. I'm happy to take any questions you may have also later on, or indirectly, or whatever is required. I hope you'll have a very productive session here in the afternoon, and yeah, I'm not sure if it's my turn to hand over to Ron or if you are going to do that. But thank you very much for having me here, and I wish you a very successful rest of the day with the finance session. Thank you very much.